there are some really innovative companies. There are innovative programs that bolt on. There's, and then I think the end of the day is how do you actually like educate, measure, and then implement? And it's not easy to do.
This is the Rebel HR Podcast, the podcast where we talk to HR innovators about all things people leadership. If you're looking for places to find about new ways to think about the world of work, this is the podcast for you. Please subscribe from your favorite podcast listening platform today and leave us a review. Rebel on, HR Rebels. All right, Rebel HR listeners, extremely excited for our conversation this week. This is going to be a good one. If you have anything to do with your employee benefits, you are going to want to tune in here and listen to this whole thing. So with us today, we have Erik Wallace. He is the Chief Commercial Officer at Goodroot. He is also the president at Co-EO. And we are going to be talking about the mission of reinventing healthcare one system at a time and some of the steps that we can take to innovate and drive for change within our employee benefits programs. Welcome to the show, Erik.
Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate it.
Really excited for the conversation. We were talking before I hit record, and this is just going to be, I think, really interesting to dive into this space and talk about this. But before we do, I want to ask, what got you into the pharmacy and healthcare space?
Well, it's a good question. If you look at my career, sort of in its infancy on a commercial perspective in sales, I was carrying a pharmaceutical bag. So in some ways, I've sort of been in this side of the industry. And then I spent a significant amount of time in the medical device industry, specifically in orthopedics and the surgical arena. And my pathway there was sort of unique. I did carry a bag there when I first started, and then quickly sort of entered this interesting role and got this sort of reputation of being what I used to call like the wolf from Pulp Fiction. I was like the cleaner, where they would just send me into these super complex problems, whether it be portfolio driven, market driven, M&A driven. And so really what I've been doing is designing commercial strategy and then scaling commercial enterprise, both from sales and marketing perspective. And I've had a lot of success in that. I really love solving complex problems at its core. It's sort of that simple. And I love leading people and finding talent. So you combine all those things together, it is sort of a good fit. And so Mike Waterbury, who's our CEO and chairman at Goodroot, he and I live in the same town, and we've been friends for a long time. And, maybe about the 20th time he explained to me what he actually was doing with pharmacy benefits is when I was able to realize the potential if he could scale that from a sales and marketing perspective. So that's exactly why I ended up in this space. I've been a student of the space for a little over a year now. I have pretty good command, at least I think, on the pharmacy side. And my colleagues might just be very nice to me. But, so that's how I landed here. It's been a wild ride, and I'm really excited about where we're headed.
Well, that's funny. The wolf from Pulp Fiction, that brought back a specific perspective, and I'm thinking about your comment, solving complex problems. I think there's probably no better space to be in than the medical industry than as it relates to complex problems, and one of the big challenges that I've faced in my career is making sure that we have a good total comp and benefits program for my employees, but trying to understand all of the opportunities that are out there, some of the challenges that are out there, and ultimately just trying to make a good decision for my employees. It's going to be the best decision for my employees from balancing all of the different levers that are there. It's just hard. it's super hard. So as you approach your role as at Goodroot and at Coeo, what is your approach? How do you approach the complex world of pharmacy benefit management?
Well, I'm going to answer that, but I want to jump off what you said, which is in your role in the podcast, in your community, but as well as what you do day in and day out, like that is really hard. That role is a challenging role. And what benefit, I mean, you can't think about any instance in our history, at least in the modern era, where benefits haven't played a bigger role. Think about the current environment in the last 2 years and what that does to culture and retention of talent and like just that whole dynamic. And then you take a market like pharmacy is just a sliver of the benefits you deliver, right? It's 30 cents on the dollar of healthcare spend that an employer invests to provide care to their employees, right? Which is their number one asset. So, but then you take the complexity inside of pharmacy and it's like, well, how do you make sense of all that noise, right? All these catchwords and the mid-tier organizations and the big three powerhouses and what's gimmicks and not, and how do you make sense of all that? So I just want to say, like, I interface with HR leaders all the time, every day, and in my past life and today. And it's complex. And I'm not just, placating to the audience here. I think I see it clearly. So apologize for the segue, but I had to just respond to that. Pharmacy benefits, man. When I started, talk about, like, you hear the expression getting sprayed with a fire hose. And it took a while for me to start to understand, right? It is not as simple as making a pill, transferring it through a wholesaler to a pharmacy, and dispensing it to a patient. That's like the iceberg. That's what happens above the surface. The transfer of data and dollars underneath between a PBM, rebates, claim adjudication, the health plan, how do the rebates flow all the way down to the group, right? It's hyper complex. I think the important piece is to take it sort of bite by bite. And through this conversation, I'm going to do my best to just stay at about 30,000 feet and just try to make it sort of ingestible, if you will, or digestible.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can tell you, that's about where I'm comfortable staying, and the truth is, especially, my role. So my current role, I'm really a generalist. I have to know a lot about, a little about a lot.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I have a wonderful team and one person in particular that deals with a lot of the processing and some of the more detailed nuances of benefits administration. But then the other aspect there is, I'm very reliant on my third party experts, my benefits brokerage teams, my PBM, my health plan administrators, to make sure that we're pointed in the right direction. But I think one of the challenges that I face as well is that means that all of the potential things that could work, or all of the innovations, are always filtered through somebody else and somebody else's exposure. And one of the things is that's a challenge, I think, is understanding the context of where those recommendations are coming from. And, is somebody getting a commission because of this recommendation, right? Or is this actually really best for my employees? And those are that's where it gets really, really complex on our end as a plan sponsor, trying to figure out, okay, what is right? What is the actual employee experience? Because really, at the end of the day, you already touched on this. It's just about making sure that our employees are happy with what they have. And if they aren't, guess what? They can probably walk down the street and find somewhere where they're happier with what they have. And so,
right.
You can't afford to have a black mark in your benefits program. So I'll pause there and take a breath, because I want to shift and understand a little bit about how Goodroot and how Coeo, how do you face kind of that challenge, or what's your approach to the industry and some of the complexity there?
We'll be back after a quick break. and so used to having everything in front of them right away that we forget that innovation just takes time. I myself, I get frustrated too. Why? And you know, this is being one of my best friends is, hey, I talk to you all the time. Hey, man, I'm frustrated in the fact that I can't seem to just get there in the next day. But that's just not how these things work, right? Innovation needs to be planned out. It needs to be very methodical. And then when it finally hits, that's when it seems like to everyone else that it sort of just came out of nowhere. But to you, you know, the amount of dedication that it took over that time.
So, I mean, the way we're designed, Goodroot essentially, we are a community of small companies, all independent companies. And our companies execute at very specific points in the pharmacy benefit delivery landscape. Okay. So in that way, this is one of the ways we address it, which is sort of specialization in what we deliver, right? We have a significantly experienced team. We have like well over 500 years of pharmacy experience from all different filter points, from the pharmaceutical manufacturer to running PBMs to running specialty pharmacies to clinical pharmacists that act in retail as well as in standard private clinical settings. We have our own P&T committee. So like we have a lot of experience with a small team. We have 70 people across our businesses, right? Which to say that 70 employees is small is sort of bizarre. It's not small. But in the world, right, in the benefit space, that's small, right? And it doesn't typically align with really strong leveraged benefits deals or pricing, if you will, right? So that's one of the ways we do it. And I think one of the things I've tried to bring here as I learned the space was finding a way to deliver it out to those third parties. I predominantly engage with TPAs and brokers and some of the third parties that you leverage and lean on, as well as your peer group here in our audience today. But what's even more important is then delivering it in a fashion that I take all the complexity, but I deliver it, and here's just the net value from an economic perspective. What could you expect to spend? But then also clearly call out, here's how much disruption is involved in that, right? And so I think in that way, what's interesting is I'm trying to present it back in a way that's different than how brokers or TPAs typically ingest it. So that's a little hurdle for me, but as soon as I can get them there, it's very easy for a plan sponsor to be able to see the decision tree and understand how much savings do I want to drive to, and what is it going to mean to my people? How noisy will it be?
Right.
Which
100%. I think
it's a sliver of what you have on your plate, but that's my approach.
It is, but you're 100% spot on. I think that's like, if I think about this like an equation, it's like, yeah, where is the balance here? Is it because we're always looking for ways to make this more economically, feasible. For an employee that doesn't deal with this on a regular basis or even an HR professional that's listening right now that maybe isn't directly related to their benefits platform, a lot of times we're just trying to find enough savings so we don't have to increase those premiums. Because we're facing the inflation of an insurer that the network fees are going up and now we have to do this, or stop loss contract is because we had a higher claim exposure. Now we've got a double digit increase, which I know many people are facing, and especially with COVID-19 hitting their plans right now. And so so we're trying to do that out of the goodness of our hearts to try to prevent premiums from going up. But the other question, the other flip side of the coin is always, how painful will this be? How noisy will this be? And ultimately, if it's roughly 30% of a plan, how much of your day do you want this to take up? It's the other thing. So yeah, that's you're spot on there.
I mean, changing human behavior is in and of itself very challenging, right? And so like you drive to anything, any change every year. Like I just like think about myself as an employee. It's like, oh, another renewal, another like, oh, I got to auto enroll, like renewal window. Like I got to go back in and do all these selections, right? And like I can tell you right now, like I haven't even downloaded the Carrier mobile app, which would like help me interpret my medical benefits for my family in a better way. Like so, it's
you and 85% of everybody else in this
yeah.
I mean, that's the truth.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so I think like there are some really innovative companies. There are innovative programs that bolt on. There's, and then I think the end of the day is how do you actually like educate, measure, and then implement? And it's not easy to do. So
yeah, I think you're so spot on. It's funny. I'll tell a story here. So we, in a past role, we had a PBM change, and it was not well received. There was some of the prescription list changed, and some people who were on some prescription for 20 plus years were asked to go try a different prescription, and they had, and their doctor didn't want them to. And, so, and as HR, you're like, usually you're the person getting the call and you're like, listen, I don't want to know, but they're telling you anyways. And you're like, that's too much information. No, thank you. But, I mean, we fought that and we fought that all year, and I mean, it was just kind of an issue. So we made the decision because of that noise. We were like, well, we're going to switch to a different pharmacy program. So we switched. And guess how mad the people were that we made a switch from the benefit program, by the way, that they hated. But just because we made a change, they were still mad, even though we made the change because of their feedback. It's like, listen, guys, we're just trying to do our best. Now, it worked out for the better, but that's a great example, like a case study and how much people hate change. Even if it's like change for the better, it's like people are still like, oh, this is terrible. Why are we doing this? Why are you doing this to me?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to give you a couple stats here, which I'm going to get into the weeds of what we do, but in some of the ways that you can get to better economics from a pharmacy perspective, it's sort of honing in the delivery network, right? Partnering more with a couple entities. And we'll call it network is retail pharmacies. It's CVS, it's Rite Aid, it's Walgreens. It's all the places our people go where they have had their prescription either sent there, if it's a new prescription, or their maintenance medications are there, right? One of the things you can do is you can narrow the network. You can literally say, we're going to carve CVS and Kroger out of the network. And when we do that, it's going to unlock all these additional savings. Now, you know exactly what's going to happen.
I can feel it right now.
The phone is going to ring because I really want to go where I've gone, which is to CVS. But I want to arm you with this. There are 13,257 McDonald's in the United States. Do you ever have a hard time finding a McDonald's if you're looking for one?
No.
Ever. There's 88,000 pharmacies. It's 2.1 to every 10,000 people in the US. So now if you could get the same drugs at a lower cost, which would help your employer maintain the employee contribution to gain access to the same level of care, but you had to go across the street to Walgreens from CVS, that might be as small of a hurdle you have to jump over to get to it. But the reality is, that's not easy.
Yeah.
You're gonna get a phone call. It's gonna happen.
It's usually a phone call when somebody's standing in line and there's 6 people behind them and they're like, this crappy, this beep, beep, beep insurance. Yep. You guys are trying to nickel and dime us, or, that's usually the context that the calls get to my desk. But I can hear it now. I mean, I can, I think probably half our audience is probably they can just feel the anxiety boiling in them when we start talking about restricting networks because they've lived it, right?
Oh.
But it is a great example of it, like and what you just described, about kind of the approach as well, which is we can't overlook is the importance of how do you communicate the change and how do you roll it out and what is the disruption, but then how do you actually manage that change? What is the communication protocol? Is it big bold letters? Don't go to this provider; they are not a network, right? So,
yeah, I think there's, I think as a society, right? If you can put it in someone's hand in their phone now, we're going to find the ability to influence that behavior, which is going to just arm them with data and influence the decisions, right? I think a lot of those scenarios, even like myself, I got my young daughter, 8 years old, hurt her knee in dance. I was trying to figure out where can I take her for an MRI. And there's a lot of different price points out there in the market. So now I'm like outside of I've like learned a little bit enough about pharmacy to manage that. But now I'm in the medical side with my daughter. I'm told I can only go to a pediatric facility. But like, my point is, if we find a way to get the education of the data in someone's hand, and like you see that with some of these cash card companies, right? Like GoodRx all over the place, Single Care, SideRx, and I know your audience is hearing that question. Like,
yeah,
why is there a lower price on GoodRx versus my copay that you're paying for? How could that be? Right?
Yeah, I mean, so let's maybe get a little bit specific there. I think that is a question I've had that question before. I've in the similar vein, I've got the question, why are generics cheaper if I don't run them through insurance? If I go to a certain discount retailer, it doesn't make any sense to me. Do we have bad insurance? That's usually kind of the context of the question. Why don't we have good enough insurance to make it cheaper? So what is the approach? Why does the industry work that way? And what is the mechanism that allows that to make sense?
Well, I would tell you this. It is, so like I'm a finance major. So like you think about economics and the law of efficient markets. This is an example of a market exposure. Okay. I'm going to try to explain how it came about and what the current state is and why this is something that every plan sponsor is hearing. Right. So where cash started, discount cards is really where it started. GoodRx, Single Care, and SideRx, they did what I was just referencing, was put the power of data and information in the palms of the consumer, direct, right? So they ran a DTC approach, bottom up, and they just put the power of choice in data. Now, where do they get that pricing, right? Which I think is what you're starting to get at. Well, how could it be lower than a generic on insurance? How could someone walking in next to me, behind me in line, pick up the same drug and have no insurance, and I have this great plan from this amazing employer, and they're paying a lower price than my copay? That's why we get the questions, and it makes sense. That market that's inefficient in the market. It's going to regulate. So what happens is, like what GoodRx and Single Care and SideRx do, they give you a search API. So you search a drug and your zip code, and what it does is it pings all of the different MAC lists. Won't get lost in these acronyms. Very simple. That is the price point that a PBM sets for that drug in that specific retail chain. Okay? That's the price to buy it there. Okay? So, like GoodRx is an example, they will ping X number of MAC lists. They will find access to the lowest price in that zip code, and they will guide you to that. They'll give you a pathway to that. And then when you click on the coupon, they give you a BIN and PCN, which allows you access to that price. You show the clerk or the pharmacist at the register, and that gets punched in and you get access to that. Okay. So you get a good price, but as a plan sponsor, what's the issue with that? When that claim adjudicates, would you see that? Would your PBM see that? No. It's outside of accumulators. It's outside of the design, formulary controls, like all the other things you'll hear about that market, right? So one of the things we have believed in, one of our sort of innovations in the space, or what we're driving towards, is the belief that if you have insurance, you should not have to download apps and search drugs while you're standing in the pharmacy to get the price that is market available. Right? If you have internet, a phone, a computer, you can go on search and download a coupon and get that price. So when we have insurance, why? Now, it's complex, sort of, but at the high level of 30,000 feet, people are making money inside of that drug, that generic, adjudicating on the benefit at a higher price. Right? Now, what starts to really sort of boil the mind is the same PBM that could be the one that delivers your benefit, and you owe a $20 copay for a drug, and then you search a cash card and you find it for $15. It could be the same PBM's MAC list that's offering that price. That's the inefficiency in this. So like what we've done is driven down a path to get to, you should have that in your benefit. It should do it automatically. You shouldn't be searching apps and coupon codes. Like, you should just get it. So I hope that I kept that high enough, but does that help, or are there areas you want me to sort of dig into?
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, first of all, I mean, I think inefficient market is probably the correct term. That's definitely, to me, it almost reminds me of, it's like when my grandma used to get the Sunday ad paper, and she'd go through and find, okay, which place has the cheapest ground beef this week and which place has the cheapest milk. And then she'd strategically figure out, okay, this is the grocery store we're going to, it's kind of the same idea. I think the thing that for me is like kind of infuriating about the entire pharmacy industry is the fact that, it could be the same PBM, right? Like, that's just goofy. That's somebody taking advantage of an inefficient market and making money. Right. And at the end of the day, we're just trying to offer a good benefit to employees. We're trying to make this as frictionless as possible. But it's hard to navigate. So I am curious to understand, so how do you do that? Like, so, let's say, I guarantee you that there's a bunch of listeners right now who are like, I've had this conversation. I don't like the answer that I give people, which is basically, I mean, now I have a much more enlightened answer, but my previous answer would have been, well, it's just like a coupon book. It's just a little bit cheaper if you go to the right place, and they have, it's like on sale, like it's just a deal, but it's outside of insurance. So you just have to know that it won't count against deductible or anything like that. So I think everybody's sitting here thinking, yeah, I really don't want to have this GoodRx thing. It's confusing. It's complicated. It brings up a ton of questions in my employees' minds, but how do I uncouple that from my plan? How do you approach this in a plan design to make sure that it is feasible and that people actually do get that kind of that leveraged lower price, regardless?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what we've done is beyond a belief that you should have a right to it. Is then how do you build the technology or just the sort of business acceptance of doing that? And I have partners inside of Coeo, PBM partners, who, when pre-negotiated contract terms, have agreed that when there is a lower cash price, they're going to adjudicate on that price automatically. Right? There's some really good players in this space who are trying to disrupt it and just take, sort of a fair, novel fee to deliver pharmacy benefit services. So that's one way we do it. Now, another big benefit is it's then it stays inside of the benefit file. It stays inside of the data file, which means it stays inside of accumulators. Accumulators are kept whole. Okay. So there's some complexity that I'm not going to get lost in that. But the point is, when it happens at the point of sale without the employee or the member having to do anything, when the system is simply doing it at the switch, which is what happens as they punch codes in behind the scenes, right? It will unlock that savings. But there's another piece here, which is really, really important. Today in the market, right? If you think about how many millions of users use these different cash app platforms every day and every month, it's significant. They would not use them if there wasn't value, right? Wouldn't happen. They wouldn't come back with complaints if there wasn't value, right? If you search it 2 or 3 times and it never hits, you're not going to continue to pull it out on your phone and search it when you're standing in line, right? So we know that's there, okay? But all you're comparing is member copay, member out of pocket to the cash price, all right? So when you do execute it the way that I'm sort of describing to you in our sort of innovative deal design, it goes beyond just cash versus copay, which is the tip of the iceberg. And I'll give you an example. So if I'm standing in a pharmacy and I was going to pay $20 copay for a specific drug, a branded drug, or a high-end generic, I was going to pay 20 and the plan was going to pay 80 behind me. Okay. But there was a $50 cash price for that drug on the market. Now it would never hit 20 copay versus 50 cash. It would never hit in the sort of the standard consumer design. Right. But when you do it at the least of logic, including member pay and plan pay, what I do is select $50 copay, keep the member whole at a $20 copay, and the plan pays $30, not $80.
Right.
There is a significant amount of savings that gets unlocked when you get inside of it. So it really is disruptive. But that piece no one sees. No one sees below the waterline of just what's happening, which is what do I pay out of pocket versus what I could get in this app. So that is like some significant leverage. Keep the accumulators whole. It's in the file. It's important, right? And then unlocking additional leverage, which exists. So I got maybe a little deeper there, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the takeaway there from this conversation, and I think it's something to consider for anybody listening is, listen, you don't just have to accept everything at face value. If there's a cheaper cash price, there's probably an opportunity for savings there, and even just being open-minded to it, as long as you understand the employee experience impact, you've got to be open-minded to this stuff. Because one of the other examples, maybe to continue to stay in the weeds a little bit, just because this is kind of fascinating for me, is I'm thinking about like specialty meds. Something like let's, I don't know, Humira, a great example, or one of these other things that you see on TV. These things are thousands of dollars a month, and I see these on my spend in my reporting, and I'm looking at these and I'm like, what is this drug that I can't pronounce that we're spending hundreds of $1,000s a year on? And somebody's like, oh yeah, well that's maybe 2 members that have this specific, condition that need this. And it's just like mind boggling. So I'm assuming that there's similar opportunities in that space.
Yeah. In the pharmacy world, what I hear from individuals like yourself and in this audience base is there's 2 main issues. And we just talked about one, which is why it's a lower price on Goodroot versus my copay. So we talked about that. The next is specialty trend, how fast it's increasing, and then how much spend is involved. And what's crazy, and we talked about this before we started recording here, 2 to 5% of your claim volume on average now, which is the specialty claim volume, right? It's the smallest section of your total claims adjudicated, represents over 50% of the spend on average. And it's 2% of your membership usually. And I think what's important in that is that's not to vilify the member. These are specialty meds are like life sustaining or quality of life sustaining meds. I mean, they are the people you need to take care of the most.
Right.
Right. So, but that part of the industry, Kyle, you've watched it happen live. Like it has gone vertical, and it's been the churn game of rebates and specialty distribution fees on specialty pharmacies. And it just has spooled up. That's what's driven it. So yes, there are a lot of different strategies in how to control that. Right. But mind you, none of those strategies could be not delivering those meds to those patients.
Right.
Right. That's a non-negotiable. And so finding the right vendor that can take you through that path is one of the things we do. Right. So, like I negotiate deals with either the PBM that offers some of those services in-house. Like we had a conversation about one of the PBMs you use today. And I would say you're on sort of the forefront of some of the strategies that can maintain access to these life-sustaining meds, but significantly help to control that trend and that spend, which inevitably will cost more to deliver the same benefits to your people, right? Like that's going to be the impact. So, I think that there's a variety of solutions there. One of the first measures I have in the market when I'm working with a vendor, whether it's PBM derived or it's a third party specialty company that executes those type of solutions, is how they handle the member experience. And, there's patient assistance out in the market, right? Pharmaceutical companies will support patients based on their, earnings, right? And sort of their tax records of whether or not they qualify. There's a significant amount of money that's available to that. Organizing the pathway to that is not easy, right? You were referencing having gone down some of those paths, right?
Paperwork nightmare. Yeah.
And scary.
Yeah.
Like, these are not the patients that you could go down a path where in order to get patient assistance, you can't have specialty benefit coverage for that drug. You won't qualify. So you think about what you're saying, wait a second, these are sickest people or the people that need the most support. And we're not just making a fiscal decision, but we are going to tell them that they don't have coverage under the plan in order to get them the same drug they're on in order to unlock the savings. Right? So you can get lost at that at face value, but the savings is critical to maintain more access to better healthcare at sustainable cost.
Right. It's just, I think it's a great example of one of those things where it's not black and white, right? And when you're dealing with an employee health benefit or a pharmacy benefit or anything related to people's need for quality of life or life, needed drugs, then it's really not something you can mess around with, and it's not just about member experience. It's about making sure that they have great access and that they're not so confused that maybe they miss out on even getting, their pharmacies filled. And now you've got a catastrophic concern on your hands. And, at the end of the day, HR's got to be the ones with that top of mind and making sure that they're protecting their employees, well-being through offering great support and service. So, this is one of those things that it's like before we hit record, I think you asked me a question like how knowledgeable are you in this space? And, my honest answer was, I can't claim to be an expert on anything related to pharmacy benefits because I just don't have that depth of knowledge. And it's such a dynamic industry that, it changes too much. I mean, if you claim to be an expert, just wait till tomorrow or wait till some new law passes or wait till some new program comes out or, it's just so hard. So, appreciate you helping us navigate through this and think through some of those scenarios. What would be kind of your final advice or a piece of recommendation that you would give to our listeners as they consider some of these benefits programs for their groups?
I think you have to find a level of expertise with significant breadth, right? So it's one of the things that I think it's allowed me to learn this space rapidly, but it also allows me to tailor a good solution to my clients, which is I see all of the PBMs, all of the vendor solutions. We've experienced them, we've measured them either in COEO or in our pharmacy consulting team, AlignRx. So we have command over the space. I think that piece is important because you need someone that can actually roll out your options with experience, knowing how to take you through that, right? Especially in your seat. Like when do we get ahead of like adjusting a contract? It's sort of easy in timing, but the next piece comes in. Well, if we're going to roll a specialty program, how much runway do we need to have? How many specialty patients do we have? How do we get to them? What's the cadence? What's the messaging, right? How do we ensure that any of those disruptions aren't, and if you haven't experienced it, it's pretty hard to go after, savings, which can, again, sustain spend. So I think that's really important. And then there's so many layers. You have to unwind incentive. Like one of the things I pride myself on with COEO and the team is a flat fee across all the choices. It's a fair fee, and I deliver all the savings to the groups we find. I'm not underwriting deals, 50 life group to 5,000 life group. It's the same deal, right? And delivered in a format that's easy to digest. And you can see what are the fiscal benefits, what is the disruption, and you have experience that takes you down that journey. So there are really good solutions out there, even if you don't come to us. It's worth exploring.
Absolutely. And I think, a couple of things that I appreciate from that approach. First of all, that incentive piece, we can't shortchange that in any way, shape, or form. You have to understand how your partners are being compensated and incentivized. Is it a percentage of what they claim you saved? Is it a cut off the top of something else? Like, you have to dig deeper. What looks like maybe a good sticker price may not be the best result, right? And you've got to ask those questions. And you really do need a partner in your camp, in your foxhole, working through this, because unfortunately, because of the market in general, unfortunately, there are some incentives that aren't right, and that can happen. But I would also say, be open-minded. At the end of the day, the best programs that I've been involved in, any sort of change programs, benefits programs, as long as the programs themselves were logical and workable, it all came down to the connection between the organizational communication, employees being taken care of, feeling taken care of, and making sure employees got connected to the right people at the right time for their needs. And that doesn't happen without a great strategy to roll out and a focus on member experience. You've got to have those things in mind. So, Erik, great content. We are going to shift gears. I'm fascinated to hear your responses to the Rebel HR Flash Round. So, 3 quick questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Question number 1. What is your favorite people book?
Okay. So I am admittedly a Malcolm Gladwell junkie. Okay. But that's not going to be new. All right. So like the Outliers, typical, just amazing books. I'll give you one I think is really interesting, which is It's Your Ship. And I'm not, I knew I would try to get one in there that you maybe haven't heard of. This is Captain Michael Abrasoff, who took a Navy ship that was in sort of the last measured metric position to the top. And it's all about people, culture, leadership. It's phenomenal.
That is a new one. You got me on that one. I'm going to have to check that one out.
All
Perfect. All right. Question number 2. Who should we be listening to?
So Dr. Bricker, AZ Healthcare. He's with First Stop Health now as their CMO. He offers just what I consider to be really sort of genuine, insightful, sort of video didactic explanations, kept in a nutshell, explaining all different aspects of the business. I would be remiss if I didn't just And I don't have any relationship directly with First Stop Health or Dr. Bricker, but like I was a student of this space and I had to learn rapidly. So I love how he delivers it. I think it would be valuable.
Yeah, I can use it as simple as possible. So if I can get it, then it's worth listening to. All right, last question. A ton of great content. I think you're doing some great things in the space. So how can our listeners connect with you and your organizations?
So we're up on LinkedIn. I think that's probably the best place to go. You can check us out on our website. It has, quick links to get to each of our companies' LinkedIn handles, and we're constantly posting articles. Our thought leaders are posting articles around different segments of what we're exploring. You can see sort of where we're going. We're partnering with a lot of, pretty important events and initiatives. So I think that's probably the best place to go.
Awesome. And we will have all this information in the show notes. So pop open your podcast player, check it out. I'm sure many plan renewals are coming up here and starting to think about this here in the spring and summer for next year. So, now is the time to get educated, learn, listen, and get prepared to help offer your organization the best total comp and benefits possible. So, Erik, thank you again for sharing your expertise. Thanks for the time here today, and have a great rest of your day.
Kyle, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, that does it for the Rebel HR podcast. Big thank you to our guests. Follow us on Facebook at Rebel HR Podcast, Twitter at Rebel HR Guy, or see our website at rebelhumanresources.com. The views and opinions expressed by Rebel HR Podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any of the organizations that we represent. No animals were harmed during the filming of this podcast.
Baby.